What's up, everybody? Ian O'Neill here with Sean Sheehan, and we're going to preview a busy weekend and a busy Saturday, really, for mixed martial arts. Two big cards taking place, one after the other. We'll have a feast of fights to look forward to. First card being, obviously, that we're going to talk about is the Cage Warriors 189 card over in Italy, in Rome. After that, we have the UFC Apex event. Maycee Barber takes on Erin Blanchfield in the women's flyweight division. And I'm looking forward to that. Johnny, are you looking forward to it? Are you looking forward to this weekend's action? I mean, look at we
Not
had,
really.
it's like it's hey, you're not on the state of the UFC here now. You got to fucking get it more positive. We're not going to talk about cheeseburgers here either. I was fucking starving after that. Here we go. I try not to curse 30 days. We're already going to be demonetized. I was starving after listening to that one, but
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Can't wait. There's some good stuff, like especially in Cage Warriors, there's a lot of Irish interest.
Yeah,
which is pretty good. A couple of the young up and coming guys, and Ryan Shelley fight. We'll get into that. I'm sure a very big one. But I think the top two in the UFC, Blanchfield and Barber and Gamrot and Klein, they're really interesting fights for a person who was almost in a title fight, and now kind of the next up and comer maybe is trying to take their spot, and we're trying to see if they're still able to keep that spot. So that's interesting. And you could argue Klein and Maycee Sheehan is a little bit, or sorry, Vieira and Maycee Sheehan is a little bit like that as well. So there's a tad bit of jeopardy, as Graham would say, in a few fights over in the UFC. And in Cage Warriors, there's always jeopardy because you're never more than a couple of fights away from a title shot or a contender series or something like that. And there are a lot of good prospects on that Cage Warriors card as well. So if you're positive, if you have a positive outlook, unlike me, you'll find stuff to like this weekend.
Look at that! I love that. I love that intrigue, that increased positivity there as we got going. Let's start off with the Rome card. I think I counted 18 fights on this card, Shawnee. An absolutely monster card. Obviously steeped with Italian talent, and as you said, steeped with some Irish talent as well. We've got Gary Rooney on the card, we've got Paddy McCurry on the card, and we've got Ryan Shelley on the card as well. And I think we probably should start with those three fights first, based off Irish interest. So let's start with Gary Rooney first, Shawnee. Coming in here at 2-1 to make his Cage Warriors debut against Enrico Ngangi. A good introduction fight for Gary Rooney here. Very excited to see what he has in his locker coming in here. Obviously, we've seen Ngangi against Irish fighter Scott Harvey in the past, and we got a good look at him in that fight. Coming in here with, I guess, Gary Rooney is similar enough style. He likes to grapple, likes to kind of, pressure fighters. Me and you were talking about Gary Rooney and this fight on WhatsApp, and, kind of describing both of their styles. And, I would describe quite obviously Gary Rooney's style similar to Richie Smullin's, that smothering grappling style, a fast pace, tries to drown opponents. And obviously, Gary works closely with Richie too, so the similarities there shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. But what we've seen with Gary Rooney and his rise up through the amateur ranks, and every time we've seen him step into the cage, obviously 2-1, not the perfect record early days, but obviously learned off from that loss. We're seeing an improved Gary Rooney every time we go in there into the cage, Shawnee, and I would expect we will see an ever improved one in Rome on Saturday night as well.
Yeah, it's funny looking at my notes here the other afternoon. I did a preview of Brad, and improves every time. The first three words written on my notes. So we were talking about him, and like, if you look at some of his early, some of the amateur fights and stuff that are on YouTube, there's a big difference, I think, between him then and him now. Like, as you said, a very heavy grappler, and he I'm sure he'll still grapple up, but he does strike a lot more in his pro ranks. And I suppose you kind of have to, don't you, because the level is getting better, and you have to up your setups and different things like that. But I would say at the moment, look, anyone 3 fights into their career is going to be green, but he looks more tight every time I see him in terms of the striking. I think the defense is coming along. Give it another 4 or 5 fights, and he doesn't look as natural as you would want at the moment. But in those 4 or 5 fights, I think he will look a lot more natural and it will be a lot better. But for what he has now, it's a very effective game, good singles and doubles on his entries, fighting out of the southpaw position as well, which is tough for opponents. Although Enrico is a southpaw too. So, that's always interesting. Because southpaws are not used to fighting southpaws either, so it is interesting. Like Enrico as well, like very good on the ground, as you mentioned, good BJJ, good wrestler, very fast hands, small enough as well for the division. In a division full of kind of smaller guys, he's usually smaller than a lot of his opponents, and his fights are kind of like he'll feel you out on the outside, but if you give him something, he'll find his way inside. Like he's really, really attacking when he needs to. Like, and another thing I had in my notes here: fast hands and slow feet. I think if you can catch him, you have to catch him before he moves almost, or when he's moving. Because if he gets in on you, those hands are just so good inside, and the small, the kind of the smaller height and the squat kind of build is very, very hard to deal with. But Gary, as I said, Gary Strike can look a lot better. He kind of attacks lads now as well with that strike and with those hooks inside to set up those good doubles. Like he's a lovely double leg, and the combos to set it up are lovely as well. So to me, this is just a very even fight. I think a very hard one to pick. Again, Ian Dean matchmaking. Maybe it's a hope that both of them might go and get a little bit of easier matchmaking to bring them on a little bit. But at the end of the day as well, like whoever wins will go to the next level, and whoever doesn't will get another matchup and bring their way back again. But from the Irish point of view, you would hope that Gary Rooney, as you kind of suggested there, could maybe get his grappling going, and maybe that would be the winning of the fight. But a very intriguing fight.
Yeah, definitely agree with what you're saying about Gary Rooney's striking as well. And I think it's going to be, I feel in this fight with the Gangi, he is dangerous. You don't want to get hit with one of those big shots. You've got to ease your way into this fight, I feel, if you're Gary Rooney. And, I think you're utilizing the jab, keeping that distance. And, I think the person who has the capability of dictating where this fight goes, where they want it to go, will be the one who gets the winner there. I think, I think Gary's going to seize on this opportunity. I'm very excited to see him in there. Like, obviously, picked up a loss in his last fight. Interestingly enough, started his amateur career as well, Shawnee, at 2-1. Won his first 2 fights, lost his 3rd fight, and then went on an 8-fight win streak, 9-fight win streak after that, if you include your amateur and your pro fights as well. So big opportunity for Gary Rooney here. I'm very excited to see him over there and in action against the Gangian. And, I think it'll be a very even match, as you said. One, I think Rooney can get the job done for sure. Moving on to the next Irish athlete, Johnny, Paddy McCurry. Huge fan. I'm massive fan and always have been a Paddy McCurry and his rise up. Obviously, cut a very frustrating kind of figure, I would imagine, in the last couple of months with the way things have gone. He spoke with Andy on the Severe. He did a really great interview with Andy, just talking about those frustrations and lots of other things as well. And the battles that this man has had to face outside of the cage in comparison to inside of the cage as well. He's well tuned to, I feel, this is the start of something big for Paddy McCurry. He needs this fight to kind of get another win under his belt, propel him to bigger opportunities. He's had some tough tests in Cage Warriors already, and he's passed those tests. He's been over in the Ultimate Fighter house. He's picked up some good wins over there, lost the fight over there as well, and picked up some great experience. Only defeat, official defeat, obviously the loss in the Ultimate Fighter household is classed as an exhibition. His only defeat technically in the professional ranks is that debut that he made against James Webb on short notice. A loss that's aged very gracefully now, Shawnee. He steps in here against Suki Faraj from Israel at a catch weight of 195. I'm very happy to see Paddy McCurry. A guy like Paddy McCurry, Shawnee, he has to be fighting. He needs to be active at this stage of his career. And it's, I'm waiting with bated breath, hoping that this fight happens, because we got so close to his last one and it was pulled at the last minute. So hoping that everything goes to plan for this one in Rome.
Yeah, it was funny, that interview we did with Andy. I was actually posting and editing a bit of the audio last night, so I only heard bits and pieces of it. I must listen to the whole thing. But do you know what? Paddy McCurry cuts me as a very, and you kind of alluded to a frustrated type of figure. It's like he knows that he should be in the UFC right now, and he probably should be 1-2-0 or 3-0 and go on to that next level. And he should be. He's right. I don't disagree with him at all. And I'll tell you what, this is a tricky enough fight here against Suki Faraj, because the thing about Suki is he's only fought 2 people, and I'll tell you, me or you might have
much tape on him at all. Like,
me or you might have beaten those 2 lads too, but he looked good in doing it. He's a good range fighter, nice teeps to the body, attacks with his lovely front kick to the face as well. I think, like, watching back a bit of Paddy as well, obviously watching him alone, but watching back for this week, I think he's a real smart counter fighter. Like, he draws lads in so well, and just the one fight, I think it was the one where he won with the jumping knee, where he just drew your man in and you couldn't even see what he hit him with. It's just your man ended up on the ground. It's like, what's happening here? And Paddy McCurry is so good at doing that. And like, he looks so big and athletic, but he's nimble, powerful, and such a good fighter. But again, Faraj is the type of guy, like, he won't be drawn in as easily, I think, as other people, the way he fights. And he is tricky on the outside. He's the tall, big guy as well. He used to fighting that way. Now, I think Paddy will be able to deal with it. I think this is a good fight where Paddy might be able to show off his jab, maybe even show off a little bit of wrestling if he wants that as well. But I think he will have the power advantage. But as you said, a whole heap, as we'd say around here, of tape on Faraj, a whole heap of tape. I like that. But yeah, I like Paddy in this one. And you would have to think if Paddy wins this, it'll either be Contender Series or title fight in Cage Warriors. And if you're Cage Warriors, I know they're coming back with it September, I'll be putting him maybe, top 2 or 3 fights on that September card in Dublin, if they at all can, if he's still there.
Yeah, I mean, look, Paddy is a finisher. And if he goes out and finishes this fight as well, I think, there's a damn good chance he gets into Contender Series here. But I definitely agree with your assessment. If the Contender Series doesn't happen, it's got to be a title fight, and it's got to be in Dublin later on this year. I honestly think that, with the history that Paddy has and being a former tough athlete as well, he should go straight into the UFC, Shawnee, to be honest, with a win. But that's the way the kind of things are working out now on the regional scene, is that you have to go through the Contender Series here. An interesting thing, I think there are dangers in this fight for Paddy, as there are in all fights. I think Faraj does hit hard. When you're frustrated, when you really want to fight, you have to have an elite level mentality, not to be too eager in there, not to kind of be forcing it too much. And I think Paddy has all of those abilities to go out there. No harm maybe getting a round or 2 in here. Just, showcase your ability. Like you said, use that jab. And, I think Paddy has the skill set here to really end this fight whenever he wants. But I know his mentality, and I know how he likes to fight. And in speaking with Andy as well, he has the bit between his teeth here. He wants to go out, and as he said, he wants to go bonus hunting. And I just don't think that he knows any other way. So I'd expect him to settle into this fight and then find a shot and get Faraj out of there fairly easily, and be bigger and better things on from this free agent after this too, he said with Andy as well. So that's interesting to make things a lot easier, I guess, in negotiations maybe with UFC or whatever. So
I'll tell you what as well, though, Faraj, if he gets McCurry out of Europe, sure, he'll be happy anyway, so I'll be all right.
I love it. He was saying he might come out to kneecap as well, Rome. That'd be a nice suggestion.
I know nothing about kneecap. I've never heard him.
You should watch the movie. It's very good. Watch the movie first and then listen to music. It's good. Let's move to the co-main event in Rome, Shawnee. Ryan Shelley back in action, 7-3, taking on Simone Diana in the 145-pound division. Big fight here for Shelley, I think, coming from a Team KF gym that's doing really, really well in 2025. So I'm excited to see him getting in there. Similar enough to McCurry, fight fell out at the last minute ahead of the Dublin card. So I know he would have been disappointed about that. Fair play to Cage Warriors, I guess, for quick turnarounds here and getting these lads on this Rome card as well. Ryan Shelley, once, was on the precipice of a title shot at Cage Warriors. Shawnee went on a fantastic run, is now 1-3 in his last 4 fights. Going through a rough patch in his career, but he has a good chance here against Simone Diana to turn it around, get back into the mix. This is a really, really important fight for Ryan Shelley's career and his career progression as well. And he needs this win here. Probably needs maybe another win or two after this as well to get him the title shot that he would like to get, I guess. But even though he is 1-3 in his last couple of fights, couple of tough opposition there. Tobias Harila, Nick Bagley, and Jordy Backus. I mean, they're no joke, either one of those boys anyway. So I think this is a good matchup for him against Simon Diana. I think he can go out there and he can show his well-roundedness. I think on the feet, I think he can use his grappling if he wants to. But I'm excited to see how he handles this moment really overall.
Well-roundedness is the word for me as well. I think if Ryan Shelley can put it all together, he can be a very, very effective fighter. I just think that issue has been the issue, like putting it all together. If he can go out and have a fight where he melds the grappling and the striking, can get the striking going, like it feels an awful lot like both Shelley brothers. It feels like if they do get a knockout or some good striking, it almost feels unusual. It almost feels like they're in defensive mode and they're more attacking and better when they're grappling, which should be the exact opposite of what it is. So
like I remember when he fought that when the Josh Reed fight and he jumped the back and locked in the rear neck. I was like, holy shit. Like I thought we were off to the races here. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
A bit of that is needed in the striking as well, I think, because there's no need to fear getting taken down anymore. You're good on the ground. You can get back up or you can sweep or whatever, get on top. Let's see some of that striking. Now, I agree with you as well. Like the thing here as well, I was just doing the betting show over in Turlough before we recorded this. And I made the point over there, like this is the best time of Simon Dana's career and the worst time of Ryan Shelley's career. But that doesn't mean that Simon Dana is a better fighter than Ryan Shelley. Like you mentioned the people he fought, like Tobias Harila, what a beast. Like Nick Bagley, in my opinion, is the best fighter in Cage Warriors right now. It's no shame to lose to either of those guys. Jordy Backus, he would have, look, I think a lot of people would have picked him to win that, but Jordy Backus is still a very, very good fighter and he beat Colin Parker as well. Let's not forget that in the middle of it around this time last year. I think Ryan Shelley can win this fight. Like Simon Dan is a good fighter. He reminds me of Matt Brown. He's nice elbows and he's a good attacking fighter. I think he's going to fight on the feet. And like, let's see some fucking fight on the feet from Ryan Shelley. Let's see him go at it on the feet, because I think he's well able to go in there and bring his A game to the party. Like it's all well and good, we need to be an MMA fighter. You need to be well-rounded. You need to do everything. Well, let's have a bit of what brought you to the dance. Let's see a bit of that striking. Let's see a few wheel kicks. Let's get fucking crazy in there. Because I'll tell you what, Ryan Shelley will never be a great fighter if he doesn't bring the great parts of his game out there. Like he will be a good fighter, and he is a good fighter right now. But I really think he needs to get that striking going more, needs a more in-tune game plan with that striking. But again, he's only 9 fights into his career. We could be saying this in 3 or 4 more fights, and it mightn't come to these 20 fights into his career, but you'd hope it will come, right? And if it does, but I still think he's to beat a guy like Simon Dana. He's a big underdog in this fight, in plus 195 in some places. Yep. Sizable enough underdog. I think he should be favored. I think he's a better fighter than Simon Dana, and I think he'll win. But again, he has to fight his fight. Let's see some. It's all well and good grappling. It's all well and good being well rounded. Let's see some striking. Let's see some of that taekwondo. Let's see what's going to make you great. And that's what I'd love to see from Ryan Shelley.
Yeah, big time. Like I think that, like all of that, what you said too, comes with the base level of confidence that you have in your abilities too, and you can start second guessing yourself, second guessing game plans and decision making in fights when you get a couple of tough decisions or a couple of tough losses in a row. But like I said, I think this is a good opportunity. He's been out of the cage now for a good spell, almost over a year. So less than a year, I guess. Anyway, but that time away, recompose yourself. Like you said, no dig on him at all for losing to a guy like Nick Bagley. I think you can learn lessons from a fight like that, and I'm really excited to see him coming in here against Diana. And I agree with you too. I think he has all the capabilities in the world here to go out there and to get the win on Saturday. Not going to go through much of the rest of the card, Sean. You've done a little bit of research on the card. Is there anything else that you would like to let anybody know to keep an eye on for this card?
I think the main event is a pretty good fight. Obviously, the the hometown guy in Giacomo Michaelis, 7-1. But like you look at these last 2 fights, he beat Ali Santalahi and Mushaslani, which are 2 very, very good wins. And the guy he's fighting, this is his first fight in Cage Warriors, Sada Ukra, but he's a really good record, 20-7. He's, he's 36 years of age. He's getting on, but he's been out of the cage for a while as well. But he's won his last 3 in a row. One against Kirill Medvedevsky, who we've seen obviously around the place for a very, very long time. And it's it's an interesting fight. Ukar is kind of a technical brawler, throws a lot of spinning kicks, all-out attack type of fighter. He does get taken down, but he's great at like sweeping, taking the back as well. A lot of submissions on his record, and loves a kind of the counter the jab with the big right hand. Very, very good. And then Michaelis, the other side of it, really calm. Reminds me of like Reese McGee from a few years ago, maybe a little bit. He fights out of the southpaw stance and fights very much on kind of that straight line, and he makes people want to grapple him, and then he kind of tires them out because he's really good takedown defense, good leg kicks. But those straight punches, those teeps, this is all about, I think the straight shots for Michaelis, tiring Ukar out, winning that fight. Michaelis is a big enough favorite. I don't know if he should be as big of a favorite as he is. I do fancy him to win, but it's a pretty good fight. Elsewhere in the card, Callum Dia looks a really, really top prospect. He's fighting, the guy who fights the prospects in George McManus. He fought Ian Gary, he fought O'Banelli, he fought everyone. That's a very interesting fight. Nicholas LeBlanc is on the card as well. Matteo Martignoni, the brother of the former champion, is on the undercard as well. So yeah, some good stuff there. There's a guy as well, Giuseppe Ruggiero. He's 9-1, fighting out of Italy as well. Looks to be one of the top prospects coming through. So, the Italian fans are going to enjoy this one, but there's plenty of Irish interest as well,
Bellissimo, as they say in Italy. I'm looking forward to that card. And it brings us right up into the next card that we're going to talk about, and that's the UFC Apex. Erin Blanchfield versus Maycee Barber. I think you said a UFC on ESPN 63?
68.
68. I was 5 off. I was close enough. Not too, I don't know, based off, I guess the reports are saying the ESPN are removing fights from their website now. We might not see too many more UFC on ESPN, so it'll be interesting to see.
Hopefully we get the next one. That'd be nice.
Yeah. UFC, dirty. Let's talk about the women's flyweight division. Erin Blanchfield versus Maycee Barber. Really intriguing fight, this, and one that I have been thinking about for a little while, and I can't really come to a conclusion on who I think is going to win this fight. It's a really good matchup and a really intriguing matchup. Erin Blanchfield obviously, likes that grapple heavy style. Maycee Barber she likes to sit down on her punches and land that big shot. I think, the fight, Johnny, a simplistic, analytic view of this fight is the winner of this fight will be Maycee Barber if she can keep this fight on the feet, in my opinion. And I think Erin Blanchfield will win if she has the ability to take down Maycee Barber and control her. Now, there's lots of intricacies around that analysis as well. The pace that the fight is fought at, Maycee Barber has been seen to tire out in 3-round fights before. Can Erin Blanchfield bring her into deep waters? Can she use her grappling to tire out Maycee Barber? Maybe, tire out her arms, take away some of the popping up punches. It's a really intriguing one, and an interesting one to see who might be, the next challenger for the title there or thereabouts. I think both of these fighters will have to win at least one more if they're going to get a crack at Valentina Shevchenko, but interesting one nonetheless, Shawnee.
It's funny you say that, because you're right about Blanchfield, and she wins most of her fights with like the kind of, or well, not most of her fights, but a lot of her fights with the heavy top game and control and all. It's funny. Maybe I missed a bit of my analysis when I was thinking about it, but control is the word I was thinking of. But I was thinking like more on the feet, because of the way the Ferro fight went and how she was able to keep that fight in the feet for so long. And we know Barber is good on the ground as well. Like, she has a few submissions and all. I was just kind of thinking to myself that maybe this fight will be more on the feet, and Blanchfield will maybe be trying to control the fight a little bit more. Now, as you said, Barber is, she is powerful and she's a lot of finishes. But the thing is, I think the big differential for Barber in her career, I'm just looking at it here again. So she has 14 wins with 6 knockouts, but she's only one of those 6 knockouts in her last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fights. So her game has kind of changed, and 2 of those losses were to Roxy and Alexa Grasso, and then she's gone on a 6-fight win streak, 5 wins by decision and won by knockout. So I think that leads to an adjustment in her game. And I actually think there might be an adjustment in Blanchfield's game as well. Now, as you say, maybe that adjustment is to be more wrestle heavy and to do even more of what she does.
If I could give some substance of why I'm thinking about that with Erin Blanchfield, I was down at, I saw her last fight live. I was in first front row seats and remember it distinctly that she tried to do that against Rosette Namajunas and keep it on the feet. And it wasn't going too well. And she made that decision halfway through round 3 or maybe round 4 and round 5 for sure, where she did mix it up and she did take Rose Namajunas down, which ultimately led to her winning a unanimous decision over the former champion. And it's like, for me, going in here, if you're going to go toe-to-toe with someone like Maycee Barber and get into striking exchanges with someone like Maycee Barber, well, the way Maycee does throw her shots, they do land more impactfully. So from a judging perspective, I feel that's not the best idea here for Erin Blanchfield, who striking is good, but she's not a fighter that has developed too much pop in her punches yet. I think she has a solid jab and a solid straight shots, but she's not really, but she could go out here and knock Maycee Barber out and make me into a fool on Saturday night. But from what we've seen so far, I don't think that the best idea here is to fight within boxing range, at least, of Maycee Barber, who does have some power in her punches. Obviously, the knockouts aren't coming as she's getting towards the upper echelon of the division, but still, from a judging perspective, the winner of those exchanges, if there were to happen for me, definitely early days anyway, would be Maycee Barber. And that's why I feel that at least, you've got to be threatening takedowns or looking to try and get Maycee Barber down. Now, Maycee Barber has shown some good takedown defense as well. It's not going to be easy, but I think, you said it once before and it's never been true, is that, don't just go for a takedown and then stop when it's not working. You got to keep going and you got to keep going and you got to keep going until eventually it works. And I think that's what she did against Rose Namajunas, and I think it worked for her. And I think the same recipe could work for her here as well.
I think a big advantage for Blanchfield in this fight is the fact it's 5 rounds and her last 2 fights have been 5 rounds. And I don't think Barber's ever been scheduled for 5 rounds. She's never fought 5 rounds anyway. I think that's a massive advantage to know. You talked about pace there, to know what cadence to fight at, to know whether to wrestle this round or strike this round or wrestle at the right time of fights, or what level of output you're given with your striking or whatever it might be as well. I think the
fact that it's 5 rounds too might mess with Barber as well. Will she have the same level of output that she would showcase in a 3-round fight? It's like lots of intricacies in this fight now, which makes it very intriguing for me. And I'm looking forward to seeing how both women approach this one. And do you think what in the terms of the title picture, Shawnee, where do you think both of these women stand?
It's hard to know, really, because, what's Zhang Weili going to do next? I have the right division, don't I? Yeah, Zhang Weili. Yeah. So she just fought Firo, who is the obvious #1 contender. Right?
No, you're Shevchenko. But you're right in what you're saying. Shevchenko, the champion.
Yes, yeah. And will Zhang Weili
move up to fight Shevchenko, which could put a halt to all proceedings in the 125-pound division.
But the problem with that is Firo was such a nailed-on #1 contender. And she had beaten Blanchfield. And I think we all know that Barber's coming from a way back. Does it give you much of an incentive if you're Shevchenko to fight Barber, who's coming from way back, or Blanchfield, who just lost to the person that you beat and lost comprehensively? Not so much. So that leads to 2 things that lead to the super fight. The super fight in that division, or her moving up and maybe having a super fight, or else we're just kind of waiting around, because there has been a lot of that in the UFC recently. So to answer your question, Ian, I don't think I know, I don't think you know, I don't think anyone fucking knows in the UFC these days. We spoke at the turn of the year, and I mentioned in the show the other day too, it's 2025 is going to be better. We're going to have more fights, and it's just not materialized like that yet. We're almost at the halfway point of the year, and we're kind of still waiting for it to get into its groove. And
it's been I would describe 2025 so far for UFC as ready, steady, stop. And both of these women could be dealt with that same problem too, as in the division that's being held up with someone wanting to move up and challenge for the title. And I think, if you were to justify somebody doing that, I think Zhang Weili is a fighter that you could justify, but she hasn't been all that active too. Champions are not as active as they used to be inside the UFC. And I think, we'll talk about the big fight next week, I think, between Sean O'Malley and Merab. Merab has the chance to become the only fighter, I believe, in the history of the UFC to defend the title 5 times in a calendar year, I believe, or something like that. Or fight for fight in a title shot, something along those lines. I'll get that stat dead right for next week. Now we're a bit early on it now, but
do you know the interesting thing with this as well, the fact that we had obviously the 3 Shevchenko Grasso fights, and we had obviously one of them being a draw, and then we had the Ultimate Fighter. Sometimes, right, if that was happening in most other divisions, it kind of
the division to catch up on itself, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Problem is, Firo fought Blanchfield and created that number 1 contender, and then everyone else is like, oh, well, there's no one else almost, which is, and we need a fight like this, I suppose, to get the next one. But then the problem is because of what happened in those interim 2 years or whatever, there's no guarantee that actually happens. So it's tough on this division. The one thing I would say as well, Ian, like with all the women's divisions, I think we might be better off having Shevchenko versus Zhang Weili now. Because what I just said might happen with those divisions. There might, like, Blanchfield might win this fight and win another fight, and then it's obvious that she's the next person. Or Blanchfield or Barber, the same thing. And maybe the same thing happens at 115. At 135, we have some light at the end of the tunnel. You know, myself and Spencer obviously talked about it, but, you know, we have the massive title fight coming up, and then we have Amanda Nunes on the brink, and then we maybe have Norma Dumont as well. So,
yeah,
I would have hope in the women's division. It's been a tough year for calendar year, or, well, year.
I think the last 2 years have been very tough for women martial arts, especially in the UFC. Obviously, I feel, you know, you talked about Shevchenko and Zhang Weili. You know, it has to happen now, and in my opinion, it's probably happening 2-3 years late at this stage. So, you know, hopefully, I think, you know, that's the best fight that I feel right now. That is the best fight that can be made in women's mixed martial arts as a total in the whole of realm of mixed martial arts. So let's move on to the co-main event: Matthias Gamrot versus Ludovic Klein. Ludovic Klein, I had to look and see, was this a last minute replacement? But no, I wasn't doing Ludovic Klein any justice, because what he's been doing over his last number of fights, Johnny, is slowly putting together quite an impressive streak. We have 3 wins and 1 draw in these last 7 fights. He's been going out there. He beaten the likes of Mason Jones, Ignacio Bahamondes, Thiago Moises, the 47th president of the United States, Roosevelt Roberts. What he's got in reward for that is a massive jump up in competition, that has to be said, against Matthias Gamrot. But the way he's been performing against, you know, with all due respect, lesser opponents is been very impressive, and it sets him up nicely for a fight against Gamrot. But, you know, I don't know. Is it too much? Is he biting off too much more than you can chew? Be careful what you wish for. The fights that you want to get yourself into. But this is exactly what he's been dreaming of, a chance to get into the top 10. But it's not going to be easy against a guy like Matthias Gamrot.
If you'd asked me a year ago, 18 months ago, I would have agreed with you, and I would have said, nah. But I think Gamrot looked horrendous in that fight with Dan Hooker. I don't think he looked amazing in the RDA fight either. And I think, like, the problem with Matthias Gamrot, and it's funny because this is a fight you're thinking, like, 28 fights for Klein, and Gamrot has had 28 fights, right? 34 years of age versus 30 years of age. Not massive difference there. They both got into the UFC around the same time, around 2020-ish. Similar sort of amount of fights in the UFC. The difference here is, and I was just looking through the record, Matthias Gamrot had 1 fight in Cage Warriors, right? But apart from that, since 2013, 13 years, all of his fights have been in Cage Warriors, KSW or the UFC. That is a long road to a long field to follow. He's had some tough fights in there, 5-round fights, you know, fighting the likes of Norman Park, Kleber Koike Erbst, Mansour Barnawi, and Lucas Shilevsky. So many different guys down through the years. And then had a tough road in the UFC as well, you know. 10 or 11 fights in the UFC.
Like, crazy run in the UFC for Gamrot too. Like, comes in against Scott Holtzman, finishes that fight. Then goes in against Jeremy Stevens.
That's a fight as well before that. He lost that one.
That 100%. And then Diego Ferreira, tough opponent. Arman Saryukin, good win over him. Lost to Beneil Dariush, Jalen Turner, Rafael Fiziev, Rafael Dos Anjos, and Dan Hooker. Like, I mean, that's killer's road there that he's after, and that wears on you whether you win or whether you lose. And you're kind of saying and alluding to the fact, and I don't disagree with you all that much, is that, you know, that's kind of worn on him as a fighter and his ability too, where we're seeing a couple of chinks in the armor. Do you think Klein is good enough to get it done? All of that being said, do you think he can find ways to get it done here? I'm not sure. I'm interested to hear your opinion on that.
I think if Mateusz Gamrot fights as well as he can, he'll definitely win. I think if Mateusz Gamrot looks like he did against Dan Hooker, I think Ludwig Klein is good enough to beat him. I put it that way. I don't think Klein is an amazing fighter. Like, I don't think he'll go on a run and beat the guys that Gamrot has beaten. I don't think that'll happen. But he's a good, solid fighter, well-rounded, can fight everywhere, experienced. And he is the type of fighter who's made to beat a guy who's not at 100%. You know, there's so many, like some fighters, like I think Leon Edwards is one of those fighters. Just so good everywhere, well-rounded. And if you're not there, he will beat you. And that's how Leon Edwards won the title. No, I don't think Klein is the same level or can do the same thing. But I think, can he beat Gamrot? If Gamrot's not his best, yes, I do. And I actually think he will beat him, because I don't think Gamrot looked good against Hooker. We're only 6 or 7 months out from that as well. It's not like it's, you know, and, you know, maybe the longer the worse, actually. But you know, you look at him and you think, very recently he was very good. And he's not that old, at 36 years of age, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But it's the KSW fights. That's the problem.
Yeah. I would like to kind of compare, like, if you were to say, you know, Gamrot was peaking, right, when he was finishing his Cage Warriors or KSW career, correct, right?
Yeah.
And then we came in, we saw him in the UFC on maybe the top of that peak. And now maybe we're seeing a little bit of decline in that peak, where you go to Klein, Ludwig Klein, and he's kind of peaking in an upward trajectory from what we've seen in recent fights as well. And I think it's an interesting crossroads we're at here for both these fighters, because as I spoke about at the start of this fight, it's a huge opportunity for Klein, but it's also a fucking massive fight for Gamrot too, to prove maybe to, you know, maybe people like you and me that he's not completely done yet. He still does have the ability, but for me, I kind of sound like a broken record. I think he's going to have to rely a lot on his grappling here again. It's kind of like my analysis for a lot of fighters tonight, but I think, you know, standing and striking with a guy like Ludwig Klein, he's got some big power. He's very unorthodox, throws some weird shots, and you know, it's a good one. It's an interesting top two fights now in the Apex are decent enough now on Saturday night. As we go down the rest of the card, maybe not so great. Raheem Brahimaj versus Billy Ray Goff in the 170-pound division. We have Dustin Jacoby versus Bruno Lopez, two heavy hitters there, Shawnee, in the 205 division. It's hard to know what to expect from Dustin Jacoby. He can go out there and he can go out there and look like a world beater sometimes, and go out and just look like absolute trash and other times. Obviously coming off a big win over Vitor Petrino, but if I remember that fight correctly, I don't think things were going all his way before he got that finish. I'm not quite sure, but
I was watching a bit of Lopez, and like, I don't know that I see enough to like definitely think this guy is going to be something, to be honest. I know he's 14-1, which is a very, very good record. But Jacoby can be dangerous. He's serious power as well. But that's one of those ones I just kind of avoid. And the fight before you mentioned, that was supposed to be Oban Elliott against Raheem Brahimaj, but obviously Oban had visa issues, and he's on the where's that card, Baku or somewhere like that.
He's gone over to Baku now. So yeah. So I saw that fight change, but I know that you had him on. I hadn't had the chance to listen to it yet, but
that was fine.
Yeah.
I'd say about, the interview was 38 minutes. I'd say the first 35 minutes of it doesn't talk about the fight at all. So it's still good. It's still good. Yeah, I think the other big fight in that is Ketlen Vieira against Macy Chiasson. You know, we mentioned at the start maybe the Jeopardy fights, and that's a Jeopardy fight, you know, in that bantamweight division. You know, what if Nunes doesn't come back? Vieira's always been kind of on the edge there. I like, my analysis on that fight would be similar to yours. Like, I think the wrestling, the grappling for Vieira is probably the way forward. Choi-San is taller than her, which kind of shocked me a little bit. But Choi-San likes to fight tall, but Vieira fights big, I think. And I think it's a bad matchup enough for Choi-San. Although she shocked me in her last fight, I didn't think she was going to win that. Maybe she could do it again, but I like
Chesson is kind of like someone that reminds. I would liken her to somebody like Jessica Pennington. Raquel Pennington, Raquel Pennington, Jessica Pennington. But
Jessica Penney, you're thinking of.
Jessica Penney. But in she with it doesn't matter. Anyway, Raquel Pennington, someone who, knows how to get the job done. She knows how to go out there and get the win, and she's not afraid to get down and dirty and gritty and make it a slugfest or make it a kind of a scrappy fight to get it done. So be interesting to see if she can do that against Caitlin Vieira. I think she can. I'd have questions over Caitlin Vieira and her durability and her mentality. Does she want to continue to do this? In recent fights, she's shown flashes of doubt, and when she's good when she's the hammer lately, but not so good if her back is against the wall and she becomes the nail. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in that fight as well. Anything else stand out to you on this card, Johnny?
No, the only other thing I think we talked about it briefly before, but one of my bets of the week is Kurt Holloway. I think that Jordan Levitt fight, I think he's a big money underdog, and especially to get the finish, that's one I would look at. I actually think that'll probably be a fun enough fight as well, because Levitt is kind of really stupid and Holloway is smart. And Levitt should win, but I think he might not. But, Trevin Giles and Gustafsson should be a good fight as well. Jeff Filo looked very good when he came into the UFC. And
I'm looking forward to that fight. That would be a fight that I'd highlight against Nascimento. He's fighting Ali and Nascimento. And, that's Nascimento is a guy that can go out there and perform really well too. So those two guys, I think that's a really good matchup. It'll be an exciting matchup. The two of them like to move forward.
And plus the opener as well, Rayan dos Santos fighting Alice Ardelaine. From an Irish point of view, she could be, if Santos win that, she could be Shauna Bannon's next opponent, maybe, someone like that. So that's probably an interesting one that I'm sure Sean will be tuning into after fighting and beating Alice last year, wasn't it? So interesting. Interesting.
That wraps us up for the preview. We touched on a couple of fights there as well. Ones that obviously are the most interesting to us. We've got a metric ton of fights to look forward to. What is there? How many fights on this card, Shawnee? 12, 18, 30 fights in total. It'll be a feast of MMA this Saturday. It was great to come on with you here, break it all down. We'll digest it on Saturday, and I'm sure we'll talk about it next week as well. So thanks everyone for listening. Enjoy the fights this weekend, and look after yourselves.